from the Panman Studios World Headquarters in Bidwell, Ohio.
What the?
Here's the philosopher monk himself, Ronnie Glenn.
Hello!
Along with Brian Vance.
Welcome back to week number 2. Here it is, already June 2nd, Ronnie. Our first show under our belt. Do you feel like you've accomplished something? I do.
Well, yeah, I do, actually. We got through that learning process.
Well, you know, it's going to take a few weeks to get everything tip-top shape, but, you know, I want to thank everybody who tuned in and joined our page.
Yeah, I'm over the moon at how many people have joined our page. If you've already joined the page, then get other people to, too. You get news and stuff that you should know.
Right. And then we just break it down for you, you know, every week, every Sunday, the new podcast. And if you missed last week's, go back, listen to that one. You know, it's always going to be there. Facebook, Hearts in the Sum. Join our page, join our groups. We got a bunch of sites. You got Twitter, @Hearts in the Sum. Is there a topic out there that is really on your mind? We might even have you call in and talk with us about it, you know? Give us those comments and questions on the pages. You can, if there's a guest out there, or if there's somebody, say for instance, in the legal field that would like to talk about these court hearings, and maybe someone from the law enforcement side that wants to talk about something, and you want to be kind of like an expert person to talk to, send us a message, and we'd love to have you on as kind of like a contributor on our show. I do want to congratulate last week's winner of a CD of their choice. It was Todd Black. Congratulations, Todd. And so he's all excited, and Todd, congratulations. And this week, a chance to win dinner, lunch, whatever you want to do at Taco Bell. We've got a meal for 2 people at least. Taco Bell gift card for whoever we choose from. Those who have left questions and comments, and we've gotten several of those. And we will. You wanted to mention one of our listeners, Amanda Chafin, sent in a comment. She had said that there's so much negativity in the news, you know, that everybody talks about, and we have to cover it, unfortunately. But isn't there something good we can hear? And you have put up a special segment for her.
I found a bit of good news, a beautiful little story of a lucky little girl.
Courtesy of our good friends over on Dateline NBC. And,
that's right, yeah.
And Keith Morrison. So this will be a feel-good story for you coming up, Amanda, so stay tuned, okay? And later on, a very, very moving commentary from Ronnie this week. It's more like a journey. It's, you know, a commentary. It's not like an Andy Rooney type commentary. This is a journey. Sit back and relax. And when he starts this story, I want you to listen to every word, because it has a lot of meaning, doesn't it, Ronnie?
Well, yeah.
All right, sounds good. First of all, want to send our heartfelt condolences and sympathies out to everyone who has experienced these awful tornadoes and just awful destruction. The weather's just been terrible so far out in the west and central United States. As of Friday, actually, they lost 9 people, got killed. 8 of them were in cars during the tornadoes that were killed. Over 100 injured in and around Oklahoma once again. Over 5 tornadoes touching down. A lot of them multiple vortexes. And on top of that, yesterday and even into today, we're going to be experiencing storms and terrible weather from the deep south all the way up the east coast into Maine. So again, just be safe. Tons of rain affecting the middle part of the country. We're getting our share through here today. We're in, you know, the Ohio Valley. These are causing massive sinkholes.
There's one right in D.C. I heard about this morning.
Nearly 12 states from North Dakota all the way over to our good friends south of us here in Kentucky have experienced this massive flooding and the sinkholes. Yes, in Missouri also, the governors are declaring states of emergency for obvious reasons. One man died after he was swept away in floodwaters yesterday, and that was in Missouri. Our good friends over at the Weather Channel, did you see this or hear about it? Mike Bettis and his crew were actually chasing a tornado, and it made an abrupt left turn into their path and rolled their car, picked it up. It was just totaled. You ought to see a picture of that. You can probably Google it and see a picture of their car. They're lucky they all made it out. Mike himself had to go to the hospital for minor injuries, one other crew member, but they all survived that, and it's amazing. They have an inside the car camera view of that tornado picking them up and rolling them. And then guess what? Yesterday, hurricane season started officially. So Is it going to be a bad hurricane season? We don't know.
What I want to know
the
is
way
what
things
the
are
names
going,
are going to be. They name them alphabetically. I want to know what the names this year are going to be.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, do they start with A?
Hmm?
You would think.
Yeah, the first one has an A name, the second one has B. Blah,
Yeah, but
blah.
don't they alternate boy-girl names? I want to mention real quick somebody that I grew up with. Ronnie, you probably grew up with All in the Family, the show All in the Family.
Yeah.
Archie and Edith Bunker.
Grew up with it on Nick at Night.
Oh, okay.
Point taken.
Jean Stapleton, who played Edith, she passed away Friday in New York. Her family reports she had won 3 Emmys and 2 Golden Globes for her performance in All in the Family. She was 90 years old, and just for a tribute to Edith, those were the days.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller played
Songs that made the hit parade.
guys like us, we had it made. Those were the days.
And you knew when you were there.
Dance for girls and men were men. Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. Didn't need no welfare state.
Everybody pulled his weight.
G.R.O. LaSalle and great. Those were the days.
You know what? We have major cancer news. A cancer breakthrough. This is coming from Robert Bazell, the NBC doctor there. Said there's a new treatment out. It's called immune therapy. It's being used on lung cancer and other cancers, breast cancer, liver cancer, everything like that. Immune therapy, what that does is it kind of tells the white blood cells to go fight the cancer cells specifically. And it's just in its beginning phases right now, but within the next few years you're going to be seeing a lot more of that, and it has a high rate of success so far. So cross our fingers, some breakthrough research in cancer. I guess President Obama visited the Oklahoma tornado damage area this past week. He visited Moore, Oklahoma, which was the first one to get hit there. And he's promising, of course, long-term federal help in rebuilding. He's got a lot more areas to visit. I'm sure he will be getting to those. Actually, the May 20th Moore tornado was the most powerful ever, and it caused an estimated $2 to $5 billion in damage.
Yeah, the first one that happened there back in '99 was a little over $1 billion.
Yeah. And then some tragic news Friday when this hotel caught on fire in Houston. This is from our friends at ABC 13 Eyewitness News in Houston. 4 firefighters killed Friday battling a massive hotel fire. It was in the southwest Houston area. It broke out just after 12 o'clock noon at the Southwest Inn. Actually, 3 firefighters, Ronnie, were killed at the scene, and the 4th one passed away at the hospital. That's what we talk about. Our first responders, our firefighters going out. You don't know if you're going to come home that day. But our thoughts and prayers are out to those families. Houston Mayor Anise Parker said that this is the most loss of life ever, and Friday will go down as the worst day in history in the Houston Fire Department. So, Jodi Arias. Ronnie, Jodi Arias' trial. She was convicted of murder. Well, the trial lasted nearly 5 months. You probably saw it on TV. It became a media sensation with its explicit sex and violence.
Then it came to this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I understand you have reached a verdict. The bailiff will please approach with the verdict. The clerk will read and record the verdict.
State of Arizona versus Jodi Ann Arias, sentencing verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action upon our oaths, unanimously find, having considered all of the facts and circumstances, that the defendant should be sentenced. No unanimous agreement. Signed, 4-person. Is this your true verdict, so say you want to know?
Yes. That was the weirdest jury ruling I've ever heard in my life.
I don't see how they can do that. I
don't know why they didn't. First of all, they didn't make them stay longer than 18 hours, because that's all they were in deliberation for. And then they come back and say that we've reached a unanimous agreement, in the fact that we can't reach a unanimous agreement on their death penalty or whatever. They had the opportunity to give her life. So You know, if they couldn't agree, why? I don't understand why they couldn't even agree on life, even if they didn't want to.
Yeah, well, it's obvious she's convicted of murder, so they got to do something with her. It's either life or death. If they can't agree on anything, it should just automatically default to life. Either way it goes, it's going to take tons of taxpayer money. Even people that are on death row take up appeal after appeal after appeal, and a lot of times they die a natural death before they even get the death penalty.
The key player in all this is going to be the prosecutor. If the prosecutor is willing to let the death penalty go, then it's automatic life. If they can't, once they pick a new jury, if that one, mistrial, can't come to a verdict or whatever, the judge can impose the life sentence. He can't impose the death penalty. So right now, I think one of the major holdups is the fact that the prosecution is holding on to the fact that they want her to suffer the death penalty. That's just crazy.
They're thinking that they're going to get another full jury.
I don't understand how that could work
in
either.
the Phoenix area. They were talking about a change of venue or something like that.
No member of the new jury would be qualified to judge the case because they didn't sit through the trial.
They
and
did
see all
not
the
sit
evidence.
through the original conviction trial.
And
how can they come in and decide fairly on a penalty phase?
And since 90% of TV for the past 2 months has been the Arias trial, that's just overwhelming bias to the public. How can you get an unbiased jury?
Well, Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery said that he believes a jury could in fact be seated in Phoenix. The deadlock from this past jury means that they'll just have to put on a new trial to determine her punishment. It's also possible, like you mentioned, that the lawyers agreed to just end the case without a trial and give Arias a life sentence with no parole. But June 20th, the court hearing is scheduled, so stay tuned. All right, Ronnie, let's quickly turn to the Syrian issue. The rebels are battling the forces of President Assad. They must receive ammunition and heavy weapons to counter the regime's tanks and aircrafts, or it will be impossible for them to prevail. Senator John McCain said that days after he quietly slipped into Syria to meet with the opposition that they just can't fight with tanks, with AK-47s. They need more stuff. Actually, McCain has been one of the most vocal lawmakers demanding aggressive U.S. action, calling for establishment of a no-fly zone and arming the rebels.
I can see trying to help out legitimate rebels and stuff like that. But one of their most active and proficient fighting forces is an affiliate of Al-Qaeda. So you arm the rebels, they're going to give the best weapons to the best fighters. Russia, last week we reported that they had shipped anti-ship cruise missiles to Syria.
Right.
Their foreign minister just this week announced that they were going to ship the S-300 air-to-air missiles so that the Syrians would have the capability of counteracting any kind of no-fly zone airstrike.
Well, you can understand why the Obama administration has been reluctant to provide weapons in this situation. You know, they fear that they will fall into the wrong hands
Al-Qaeda.
in a volatile region. Right.
Yeah.
Senator McCain said he spoke with Secretary of State John Kerry a couple of times, and it wasn't that he was hiding from him, and the fact that he went, he just didn't seem to come up, he said, but we couldn't have done it without their cooperation.
Russia's kind of more on Syria's side than they are ours. A week or two ago, a Senate committee passed a resolution that they want to get voted on by the Senate and the House and present to the President to sign as a law that would allow him to arm these rebels and stuff like that. But one of the provisions in it says that we would have to place sanctions on anybody who provided Assad's regime with oil or weapons. And that's what Russia does. So are we really going to impose sanctions like that against Russia? If it was law, it's never going to get to the president's desk. But if it did, how would we do that, How would we justify that? I mean, Russia already is extremely suspicious of us and antagonistic, and we place embargoes on them just like we do other countries where we won't let money go in and we freeze accounts and blah, 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 blah. But, one of those provisions was to sanction anybody who gave Assad oil and arms.
Right.
And Russia does that.
Well, for those of you who don't know the actual history of the conflict that's been going on, 2 years of violence in Syria have killed more than 70,000 people. according to the United Nations. President Barack Obama has demanded that Assad give up power, while Russia has stood by Syria, its closest ally in the Arab world. Russian officials have said that they will support anti-aircraft systems to Syria, and Assad suggested last Thursday that he had received the first shipment. So the United States and Russia are trying to get the Syrian government and opposition forces into peace negotiations. Those talks, initially planned for Geneva, have been delayed until at least next month at the earliest.
Yeah, well, I mean, the weird thing is that Assad's regime in Syria has agreed to attend the peace talks and tried to negotiate a peaceful resolution. But the rebels, they haven't committed to going to the bargaining table and trying to fix this situation. So it's weird, but it shows, willingness on Assad's part, and more than likely has some kind of cynical, sinister reason maybe, but at least he's doing good PR and saying, yeah, we'll go. It's them that won't,
Moving on now from our good friends at the Miami Herald, they're saying that the Zimmerman lawyer, the prosecutor, withheld evidence. Court employee retrieved photos and deleted text messages from Trayvon Martin's cell phone, has been placed on administrative leave after an attorney testified that prosecutors didn't properly turn over the evidence to the defense. Former prosecutor, the name Wesley White, said he was ethically obligated to reveal the Fourth Judicial Circuit information. White said he wasn't surprised at possible evidence violations by the Zimmerman prosecutor. Of course, Zimmerman is charged with second-degree murder in 17-year-old Martin's killing. He has pleaded not guilty, saying he acted in self-defense. Circuit Judge Deborah Nelson has denied a defense motion to delay the trial, which is scheduled to begin on June 10th. That's one thing I'd like to get into in maybe another show here in the near future, is the actual stand your ground law and what states have it, and talk about that.
It's very interesting. It would have to be part of an ALEC story. All you people out there need to know about ALEC, and I promise the next 2 or 3 weeks I'll put together a feature to explain to you why this organization is so insidious and should be disbanded and whatever at all costs.
Okay. And going quickly back to the Zimmerman cases, the defense team's website, I guess, this past Wednesday said that Zimmerman's defense fund had less than $5,000 left in it. The actual fund had raised almost $315,000 in January.
Well, hell, he could do like Arias and make the state pay $1.5 million to defend her.
That's true.
And maybe have to do it all over again.
Attorneys are calculating that Zimmerman needs another $120,000 to put on a good defense, or even another $75,000 to give him a fighting chance. I don't think
Zimmerman has a fighting chance in any respect.
Oh my goodness, we'll have to see how that turns out.
Attacked by a bag of Skittles. Oh no.
Michelle Bachmann in the news here lately.
It's a sad, sad day for humor everywhere.
Do we have a little soundbite from Michelle?
Oh yeah, she released a video yesterday. I found it interesting that it was 2:30 when she released it, but here we'll play the first part of the clip here.
My good friends, after a great deal of thought and deliberation, I have decided next year I will not seek a 5th congressional term to represent the wonderful people of the 6th District of Minnesota. After serious consideration, I am confident that this is the right decision.
And then everybody basically knows that it's because she's under all these investigations about her campaigning, and especially since the FBI came in to investigate, that suggests the possibility that there would be criminal charges and stuff. So she bowed out. She said she's not bowing out because she's afraid of this other guy who has her beat by a couple of points in the polls. Here, we got another clip.
Assured, this decision was not impacted in any way by the recent inquiries into the activities of my former presidential campaign or my former presidential staff. It was clearly understood that compliance with all rules and regulations was an absolute necessity for my presidential campaign, and I have no reason to believe that that was not the case.
All in all, Ronnie, Jim Graves is the man who was running against Michelle Bachmann in Minnesota's 6th District until she announced her surprise retirement, effectively pulling out of the race so he won't have to face off against her. Graves is actually a hotel magnate, a businessman who lost to Bachmann by merely points in 2012.
Oh, yeah, it was very close.
And as another one of the National Democrats' top recruits drops out, Nancy Pelosi's fantasy of Democrats reclaiming the House becomes further out of reach every day. There's really no way anyone could run and win who would be worse than Michelle Bachmann, as what Graves said, so we accomplished that task.
We got another clip here to listen to. She was in her farewell speech, if you want to call it that. She'll finish out her term, but she was talking about all the things that she had done good and accomplished in Congress and whatnot, and she's only ever had one bill passed, and that was the House vote to repeal Obamacare a week or two ago, which is not going to go anywhere. You know, she tried to act like she was tough. Here, listen to this clip about her talking about terrorists.
I've called out the Muslim Jihad terrorists for who they are and for the evil that they perpetrate upon our people.
And I'm sorry, I don't see Michelle Bachmann as tough. I see her as stupid. So,
she can sneak up behind you.
Even though we're going to miss all the good jokes to be had, just
I'm definitely going to miss her, yeah.
Well, Stewart hated losing all the good jokes about Trump when he left.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing with Bachmann. You can make fun of. She says something stupid every day that you could make fun of.
So there you go.
It's a sad, sad day for humor.
Latest on Michelle. This is a big issue across the country, Ronnie. Aaron Butler is the leader of his 8-year-old son, Evans, his Cub Scout wolf den in Minnesota. And he said he didn't explain to his eldest son exactly why they were walking away from an organization they loved so much, but he called it quits after the vote allowing gay kids to become Boy Scouts. Some families are calling it quits. And
you're always going to have people like that, and it's terrible for the kids. You know,
it is, and
they're there having fun. They're not having wild orgies at the camp meetings or anything like that.
It's not going to change anything they've ever done.
No,
I mean everything's going to be the same. As many scouts and families rejoiced over the Boy Scout of America, their decision to partly end the membership guidelines that had drawn criticism from supporters of the LGBT rights, both inside and outside of the organization. Well, Ronnie, when they were asked about families saying they would leave over the decision, the Boy Scouts of America President Wayne Perry said last week that we think that on reflection that many of these people will decide that the best place for their kids is in scouting. You know, most organizations that charter scouting units were continuing with the program. Some had decided not to renew. As for adult leaders and volunteers, Boy Scout officials last week said there would be no change to the adult membership policy, which excludes gays. So that essentially means that after a boy turns 18, he would graduate from the Boy Scouts and have to apply to become an adult leader, when the membership policy barring gays would apply.
I have to think that a lot of these families that are pulling their kids out are the same ones who see homosexuality as a disease that can be cured, or, pray away the gay. It just doesn't work like that. And if they don't even want to learn about how it might actually work, then that's hurting their kids too, as well as the rest of the world. Hatred and bigotry and prejudice just drains everybody, even if you're not yourself participating in it.
Well, I myself have a ton of friends on Facebook and just friends in my life that are in the LGBT community. They don't need any more to go through, in my view. Gay rights activists pledged to continue their campaign to include adults, even as they applauded the vote. So,
it's pretty bad when a gay man walking down the street in Greenwich Village at midnight has some total stranger come up to him and just shoot him because he was walking with his boyfriend.
Right.
Right. It's stupid.
So what I want to do at this point, and we've had some people comment, what do you think about the Boy Scout vote and all that stuff. If you're a current or former member of the Boy Scouts and would like to share your thoughts on how your troop, pack, or council is handling the change in the membership policy, you can email us at partsinthesum@outlook.com, and we'd be more than happy to either share your comments or speak with you on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Want to know how it's affecting you.
Glenn Beck had an interesting thing today. Here, I'll play this clip first so you see where we're coming from.
But the media has their own agenda, the media goes for it, and if the media has a storyline, it just writes it in. And currently the storyline is conspiracy theorist. Now why? Why would that be the agenda item now? Why is it a concentrated effort, more than any other time in my career? Why is it a concentrated effort now to label me a conspiracy theorist?
See, what I don't get is why anybody ever thought that he wasn't a conspiracy theorist. You know,
Glenn,
he's had some wildlands. The cap and trade / crime incorporated conspiracy, which was in order to perpetuate the redistribution of wealth scam that is cap and trade, an environmental organization that used to have Barack Obama on its board, steered grants to the climate exchange. Another one is Google and the government. Beck urged his listeners not to use Google because of an apparent disinformation campaign being orchestrated by the popular internet company. You know? Obama loves the World Trade Center bomber. Beck, through his website, reported that the Obama administration was plotting to release the so-called blind sake to Egypt as a way to resolve the crisis there. System X is spying on our schools. On his show, Beck wheeled out his chalkboard to explain how this one works. Through a series of scribblings and spooky words, Beck outlined a conspiracy in which the Department of Education is installing sensors in school chairs, MRI machines in classrooms, in order to gather personal information about students and parents as a means of establishing, quote, System X, end quote, with one political party controlling all aspects of life. He also claims there was a Boston Marathon bombing cover-up, that the Oklahoma City bombing was a false flag event. The Egyptian Marcus Caliphate. I can't even unwrap all of the moving parts on this one, but it involves communism, a new Franz Ferdinand movement, a, quote, shadow government in Egypt, along with red flags in Wisconsin, for whatever reason, and Ariana Huffington hosting, quote, shadow party conventions, end quote. See, why would anybody ever think Glenn Beck was a conspiracy theorist?
I used to listen to Glenn Beck on the radio a lot, and then he went to where, CNN?
He's on his own little show. He
booted off.
Well, he went to Fox News, and then
News,
Fox News kicked him, and he started his own internet thing so that he could keep having people watch him because he likes to be looked at and paid attention to. And half the time I think he says the crazy crap that he does because people will go to work the next day and go, oh, did you hear what Glenn Beck said? And that night they'll go home to see if Glenn Beck says anything even worse than what they were told he said last night.
That's why they keep listening, right?
Yeah.
But, I sort of admire him. If I paid attention enough, I think he rose up from being an alcoholic. He had nothing, literally nothing. And for him to get to where he is now, where he has the platform to speak to the nation and the world on whatever he talks about is astounding, though. I do respect him for that.
Yeah, I mean, you like a rags to riches story. But
and he sent me an autographed picture. So
he has a responsibility to the public to not spread information that would cause division and one group hostile against another. And that's exactly what Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and those on the extreme right do. They create this division. They have free speech. They're allowed to think what they want and whatnot, but that's not the thing. I read an article a day or two ago that a Tea Party candidate wanted to rise up and shoot a U.S. representative,
Right.
It's extreme people like that, and these are the people that listen to Glenn Beck, and no, Glenn Beck's not a conspiracy theorist at all.
Well, that's a lot of the headlines this week in the news, and we're going to continue to follow more as we head into next week's show. Want to thank our good friends at Turner HD Media. Check them out at turnerhdmedia.com, and also yourhometownstation.net. It is the music. We play what we like. Check them out. We're going to hear from them real quick, then we're going to come back, and Ronnie has a great commentary coming up, and then we're going to have some items from you and a chance for you to win Taco Bell right after this.
HometownStation.net. HometownStation.net. The best music.
Playing the biggest hits of all time.
We play what we like. The Doobie Brothers. Ricky Martin. Coldplay. Heart. Matchbox 20. The Bee Gees. ZZ Top. Delicious. Phil Collins. The Rolling Stones. Delicious. Rod Stewart. Eric Clapton. Delicious. Fleetwood Mac. Deliciously. Delicious. Delicious. Cool. Delicious. HometownStation.net. Deliciously. All right. Delicious.
Are you ready? Let's go.
Delicious. Deliciously. HometownStation.net.
Internet radio. Streaming 24/7.
Liberty and the Middle East. There once was a ship, a former World War II destroyer that, in the later years, had been acquired for use by analysts from the NSA, the National Security Agency. One night, on the west coast of Africa, the ship had docked, and a lot of its crew had taken the opportunity to enjoy some shore leave recreation at bars and such. In the middle of the night, though, an order was transmitted to the ship ordering its immediate embarking and assignment to travel into the Mediterranean, which they did. Taking station after the long trip, they performed a slow, circuitous path in the southeastern region of the Mediterranean. Careful to remain in international waters so that no state sovereignty would be violated, they performed their electronic signals intelligence gathering from about 15 to 20 miles off the coasts of Egypt and Israel. One morning, soon after arriving, officers had stood up on the deck looking around and taking in the beautiful weather and scenery. Then a little airplane flew overhead. It would do the same a few more times, and then it left. A little while later, the type of aircraft was remarkably different. Fighter jets, armed fighter jets, and they used them on this ship. High-caliber rounds punched through the steel plating of the ship, wounding and killing many dozens of the ship's crew. And then they left. It was almost a sigh of relief at their departure in the moments before they started dealing with the wounded and the dead, the damage control duties, fighting fires and the like. Then the planes came back. This time they came back with napalm. They used the napalm just like they used the munitions they had emptied out during the first sortie. Ship in flames, bullet-ridden, enough blood from the wounded, dying, and dead on the metal of the deck made every step a slip. There was enough blood to produce the same kind of effect as if you poured out a can of motor oil and started trying to walk on it. And then the aircraft left again. However, at about that time, the remaining active personnel on the ship realized 3 boats on the horizon moving very fast in their direction. At first hoped to be rescue, these turned out not to be rescue. They were torpedo boats. Missing with 4 of the torpedoes they launched, a 5th one connected, blowing a 40-foot hole in the side of the ship. As the survivors were rushing around to deal with the situation and get the lifeboats ready, the commanders of the torpedo boats realized that there were still those alive, and those were going to try to escape this attack. So they used the mounted guns on their boats and shot the lifeboats to pieces. Sounds like a scenario in which the United States might have found itself in the War on Terror, doesn't it? After all, the USS Cole was bombed, but this didn't happen recently. It happened in June of 1967. The ship was called the USS Liberty. The attackers were called Israelis. This was the Cold War, even more specifically the Six-Day War, fought between Israel against Egypt and Syria. The USS Liberty, sent on this mission to listen in on all the radio signals and such that were being sent out, so that the United States could get a better picture of what was going on the ground there. And therein lies the problem. What they were doing there. The explanation given by Israel to the United States called it a tragic mix-up, not deliberate, because of some confusion about identifying the ship and thinking that it was an Egyptian ship. Publicly, the United States accepted the explanation and apology without question. But 34 servicemen were killed in that attack, and Congress has never even held close to any sort of hearing on it. Yet, we hear the word Benghazi close to 200 times a day. What the Israelis were so desperately trying to hide, worth enough to them to commit to sinking a United States ship and leaving none of its survivors alive, was what was happening at an Egyptian town called El Al-Rish. The minaret there could be seen from the deck of the Liberty 15 miles away from the coast. Among other human rights violations and war crimes that occurred during Israel's executing its Six-Day War, what happened at the moment the Liberty was being attacked was the crux of the matter. James Bamford writes, quote, "At the time, Israel was loudly proclaiming, to the United States, to the United Nations, and to the world, that it was the victim of Egyptian aggression, and that it alone held the moral high ground." End quote. But in light of some of the facts of how the Israelis operated, you realize that that is a little more slightly farther from the truth. For example, number 1, A convoy of Indian peacekeeper soldiers, flying the blue United Nations flag from their jeeps and trucks, were on their way to Gaza when they met an Israeli tank column on the road. As the Israelis approached, the UN observers pulled aside and stopped to get out of the way. One of the tanks rotated its turret and opened fire from a few feet away. The Israeli tank then rammed its gun through the windshield of an Indian jeep and decapitated the 2 men inside. When other Indians went to aid their comrades, they were mowed down by machine gun fire. Another Israeli tank thrust its gun into a UN truck, lifted it, and smashed it to the ground, killing or wounding all the occupants. In Gaza, Israeli tanks blasted 6 rounds into UN headquarters, which was flying the UN flag. 14 members were killed in the process. Second, by June 8th, 3 days after Israel launched the war, Egyptian prisoners in the Sinai had become a nuisance, but there was another way to deal with them. As the Liberty sat within earshot of El Al-Arish, eavesdropping on surrounding communications, Israeli soldiers turned the town into a slaughterhouse, systematically but butchering their prisoners. In the shadow of the El Al-Arish mosque, they lined up about 60 unarmed Egyptian prisoners, hands tied behind their backs, and then opened fire with machine guns until the pale desert sand turned red. Then they forced other prisoners to bury the victims in mass graves. In an arrogant, located on the fringe of reality answer addressing the question of Israeli war crimes, Ariel Sharon said in 1995, quote, "Israel doesn't need this, and no one can preach to us about this. No one," end quote. How can we justify letting Israel pull us into military actions, as they tried to do last fall with the bombing of Iran, when they operate such events such as this incident? They blew out any sort of protocol when they bombed inside Syria recently, for whatever reason, and, keeping in mind that the Middle East really doesn't like Israel anyways, what happens when they do something else like this, and they suffer retaliation, which the United States would never stand for, and get us sucked into an armed conflict to, quote, defend Israel? I've said before that I believe Syria, more than most, constitutes the best candidate for the powder keg that would result in an old-style world war. Israel might be the one pulling out a matchbook asking, "Need a light?" What happens when this starts, and Israel and Syria pull us and the other allies in the Western world into a fight against Syria, Russia, Iran, and all of their allies in the Middle East? What happens then?
Well, into this first full week of June 2013. Some of these stories, you might want to usher the kids out of the room if they're listening, because there's some wacky, oddball news. This guy riding around town on a scooter, but he's wearing nothing but thong underwear. Oh, don't forget, and a cape. That may sound a bit odd, but it's not illegal, police say. This is in Madison, Wisconsin. This mysterious man, simply known as Thong Cape Scooter Man, came to attention of authorities in Wisconsin last week. The shock staff at JFK Elementary School in the Wisconsin Capitol called police after he rode past their school in nothing but a thong and a cape. Officers went to speak to the 56-year-old man at his home, but decided he had not broken any laws and was just passing through the area while students were walking to a bus. I don't know if this is true or not, but, you know, I was talking to Ronnie about it earlier, and he says it might be just like a fakery, but it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's a lizard. And where is it? On Mars. That's right, a lizard has been spotted on the surface of Mars, reports a science blogger. He claims NASA could be planting animals on the red planet. Actually, the reptile was first noticed by a spotter in Japan who alerted the UFO Sightings Daily website. This odd creature just discovered on Mars by a person in Japan in March. I don't know. I don't know about that. Have you ever heard of this syndrome? It's called the walking corpse syndrome. Well, a man in Britain woke up 9 years ago. He was utterly convinced that he was no longer alive, and even though he was still breathing, doctors diagnosed him with Cotard syndrome, which is also known as walking corpse syndrome. It makes people think that they've turned into zombies, actually. But Mr. Graham did not believe them. However, he insisted that his brain was dead. The unusual condition emerged after Graham, who suffered from severe depression, tried to commit suicide by taking an electrical appliance with him into the bath. 8 months later, he told doctors that his brain had died or was at best missing. Other odd parts in the news this week, several miscellaneous bits and pieces of the first moon mission have orbited back into our field of view lately. And now, thanks to Karen Nelson at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, about 20 forgotten vials of moon dust collected by Neil Armstrong and Aldrin have been rescued from a grave of their own, a warehouse at the Berkeley lab where they had sat quietly gathering Earth dust, I guess you could say, for the last 40 years or so. Maybe some of you have heard of this one, a tea kettle that looks like Hitler is brewing some trouble. It's actually on a billboard. Amused motorists took photographs of the huge J.C. Penney billboard advertising the tea kettle as they drove past it on the 405 near Culver City in California, one of the busiest stretches of America's roads. And that Hitler looks like a tea kettle, commented one of the drivers. He even has his right arm extended, said another driver, while the third driver added, I'm a little Nazi, short and stout. And you know the song, Louie, Louie, oh baby, now we gotta go, by the Kingsmen? It might not strike you as a Federal Bureau of Investigation material, but the song Louie, Louie was under investigation by the FBI for 2 whole years. Believe it or not, the Bureau's interest had to do with the lyrics of the song, which most listeners find either confusing or simply impossible to understand. Those muddled words turned out to be big trouble for Louie Louie, as at least one person heard a few things in there that weren't exactly suiting for a teenage audience at the time. And there you go, this week's Odd Parts in the News. You know, Ronnie, history was one of my favorite classes in school. Was it yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a wonderful teacher that just totally got me into history, and it's never dropped out of one of my top 5 interests in life.
I think history teachers are just some of the coolest. The second in line would probably be science and biology type teachers.
I had some pretty good ones of those, too.
But we're talking about history this week in history, and how many of you paid attention in school? We'll find out. 1901, Benjamin Adams was arrested for playing golf on Sunday. This was in New York. How in the world would he be arrested for playing golf on Sunday?
Well, they're called blue laws. They were statutes written in the early days of the country because they observed the Sabbath, and you're not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. So they made laws that would get you in trouble if you did. There was even a law somewhere in a state, one of the blue laws was you couldn't even tie your shoelaces on Sunday.
I know there's some
it's just
weird
some amount of work. You're only allowed to walk a certain distance, like a quarter of a mile the whole day, and you can't fix any food, so everybody fixed their food the day before.
Well, this was on the Sabbath.
On Sundays,
On Sundays, and
there's still some of these blue laws on the books all around the country that nobody knows about, so they don't know that they have something that they would probably want repealed. They just don't know they exist.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I guess I didn't pay attention on that day. 1924, Snyder Act. U.S. citizenship granted to all American Indians on that date. It was 1924.
Well, at least,
why did it take so long?
Well, they tried to control the population, put on more reservations, and 1924 is around the time that the United States started passing immigration legislation that set quota limits on how many people from certain countries could come to the U.S. every year. One of the things was that no Chinese person would be admitted, and the quota was based on the...
they just singled out the Chinese?
Yeah, they weren't allowed to come. However many was allowed to come from each country was based on proportionately how many of those ethnic groups were in the United States in the 1880s.
I
so
see.
If in 1880 the Germans had 100,000 people, then when they wrote the legislation in 1924, they only allowed 100,000 people from Germany in every year.
I see. So it was just like a quota that they had to keep. And
it's kind of discriminatory and unfair in a lot of ways.
Kinda.
They basically blocked out Eastern Europe. Roosevelt and the other presidents wouldn't let the persecuted Jews enter the United States when they were trying to flee from Germany.
Yeah, that is interesting. You know, we went grocery shopping this weekend a little bit. Had to catch up on some first of the month things, and
he forgot my chocolate milk.
I forgot your chocolate milk, but I got some cheese. And you know what? You know, a lot of people have cheese wheels or cheese.
No, cheese wheels are usually top-end, smelly kind of cheese.
That's just where you don't take a bath. I'm just kidding. No.
Yeah, I eat my finest cheese in the bath.
No, I mean cheese blocks or something like that. Anyway, Velveeta cheese was created by Kraft on this date in 1928, and I didn't realize maybe my cheese is that old in the cabinet.
It could be.
It could be one of the originals.
Some of that I don't like the stinky cheese, and that stuff in the back looks like blue cheese, but now that you mention it, it might just be the mold on the regular cheese. But either way, I'm not going to touch it.
What's the real bad smelly cheese? Limburger. Limburger is the smelly cheese, I think. Yes. All right, this date in 1952, Maurice Olley of General Motors begins designing the Corvette.
I tell you what, everybody had those sleek Corvettes in the 80s, and
Prince wrote a song about it. Little Red Corvette.
My favorite Corvette was the 57. It was two-tone. It was beautiful. I would love to have one of those and a Volkswagen Beetle from the 60s.
Awesome.
And a Volkswagen Bus if I could get one of those. But I definitely want a Beetle.
A Volkswagen Bus is kind of like one of those Scooby-Doo Shaggy things.
Yeah, it's a van. They call it a bus, but it's a van.
Yeah, I like those. Now, my buddy in Florida, he moved to Florida. He was from the Jackson area originally. Paul Nordine. If he's listening, hey, Paul, how's it going? He has a bright canary yellow Corvette that he used to cruise around here. And I don't know if he still has that or not, but yes, this was the designing of the Corvette, 1952. Now, just a year later, 1953, the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in Westminster Abbey. What takes place during a coronation?
Oh, it's a huge celebration. The whole country comes out, and the monarch who is to be crowned goes to Westminster Abbey, and there's this whole process of kneeling and being blessed. But the coronation is, a sacred ceremony because historically, kings rule by divine right, so they go there, and it's kind of like a baptism for royalty.
But it's after they're in office.
A coronation is the British equivalent of an inauguration in the United States.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, moving on. 1960, Broadway theaters closed down in New York. You know why? Labor dispute. It was between the owners and the Actors Equity.
Man,
that happens from time to time.
Yeah, but entertainers, I can understand some of the lower level ones, that don't make as much as everybody thinks all actors make and whatnot. But entertainment strikes make me mad. The writer's strike they had a few years ago cut half of my seasons off.
Yeah. Now
you're everything.
You're a big connoisseur of TV shows. And series and episodes, and when that happened, that was the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. Has it happened before?
Not
any
really.
time before that?
Not that I can remember. But it's like, House usually had a season that had 24 episodes in it.
Love House, yeah.
And because of the writer's strike, we only got 13. So the writers couldn't write, because
even
it's a union thing. And
even the talk shows, The Tonight Show didn't have writers. David Letterman didn't have writers. All those guys didn't have writers at the time. And they just came out and had to do it on their own. Most of the time, they weren't funny.
Yeah.
It's those guys that give them the boost.
Those writers can't live on $200,000. You can't force them to be under the poverty line.
No.
It just ain't right.
1979, Pope John Paul II becomes the first pope to visit a communist country, which happened to be his own, where he's from, Poland.
Poland, right. At that time, Poland was still a communist country, and the Solidarity movement was working and stuff like that, but I think he stayed away. I think popes have stayed away from it as long as they did because the communism in general is atheistic. There were still some Russian holdouts to Orthodox and whatever, but for a pope to go to a communist country, that was kind of, self-defeating. And if they did believe in their party ideology, they didn't believe in God,
Right. Wow.
But John Paul II immensely helped the Solidarity movement a lot more after he became pope. And eventually Poland won their independence later on in the 80s.
Well, let's see. Are you a good speller?
I think I can hold my own, but I know I can't spell every word.
I'm just saying that because I know I probably couldn't spell this, and I'm the one asking the question. 1994, 67th National Spelling Bee is where we are. Ned Andrews wins by spelling the word, and let me try to pronounce this correctly, antediluvian.
Yeah, Antediluvian.
Yes!
Yeah.
Now you just won the 1994 spelling bee.
Well, my trophy's a little late, people.
I bet Ned Andrews has something to say about that, buddy. Also on this week, the Oklahoma City bombing, of course, occurred in 95, I believe. 95,
domestic terrorism.
97 on this date, Timothy McVeigh was found guilty of the Oklahoma City bombing, killing 168 people.
Yeah. It was the most highest perceivable act of domestic terrorism.
At the time, right?
we were. Well, I don't think anybody's done anything worse since then, domestically. That was an American doing something to an American thing. You know, we've had the terrorist attacks on 9/11 and stuff like that.
He was an American.
Yeah, we have little tiny terrorist actions, but you know, we don't need to import our terrorists. We have plenty of them here in the United States.
I agree. And we have to be vigilant with everyone. 2004, Ken Jennings. You remember that name?
Jennings sounds familiar.
Well, yeah. He began his
Jeopardy.
Yes.
He played against Watson.
Yeah, the IBM computer.
Yeah.
And it beat him. Ken Jennings begins his 74-game winning streak on the syndicated game show Jeopardy.
God, I wonder
74-game winning streak.
I wonder how much money that was.
It was a bunch, and I remember it on because every night I would come home from work and I would see Ken Jennings on, Ken Jennings again. And it was kind of amazing after it was all done, but just seeing the same person on for 74 days straight, pretty much. Yeah. Weekdays, at least. So there you go. This week in history. Wow, that was an excellent commentary, Ronnie. Like I said, it was a journey. What a story.
I first read a book on the NSA. One of its chapters, Chapter 7, was called Blood, and it told the story of what happened to the USS Liberty that day. And I was just shocked that Israel would do that to us, but that our own government, the high officials, President Jonathan and everybody else,
would just forgive it.
They knew that it was a lie. It wasn't a mistake, that it was deliberate, but they didn't want to go against Israel, so they just politely, diplomatically accepted the apology and whatnot.
I mean, how many were lost in that?
Several dozen, and then over 100 and some more wounded.
Wow. That's just a sad story.
It is. And nobody ever remembers it. I haven't met anybody else that I've known that what the USS Liberty is.
That's a good reason for all of our listeners or those who want to get involved to send us questions or even comments on anything you've heard in the show, and we'd love to hear from you. Plus, we're going to start doing a trivia question. We've decided to change up the contest a little bit. We're still going to change the prizes around, but I think next week we're going to give away a chance for you to win an iTunes gift card, which allows you to get apps, songs, a little bit of everything. You can use it on iTunes for anything you want. We're going to give that away, but through a trivia question. And the way that's going to work is we'll ask the question on the podcast. After you hear it, the first person to comment in our Facebook page the correct answer will win the prize that week. The same person can win just one time a month, but then you're eligible again the next month to start again. So
yeah, we can't just be giving one person all the cool stuff all the
all
time.
the cool stuff. Now, you know what? I'm thinking this week, we had a lot of comments from Amanda Chafin. So she wanted a feel-good story. Well, without further ado, let's give her that feel-good story right now from our good friends at Dateline NBC. It's Keith Morrison with the story.
Love you, Lindsay Lou. And there she goes.
What is happening to the Bingham family, Jason and Stacy and their 5 children, is like something out of Ripley's Believe It or Not. It is also, for all of them, an intensely personal and terrifying odyssey. For reasons you'll discover, they've overcome their reluctance and will allow us to be here as witnesses.
Hi, guys. Well, hello there.
We'll even record some of the journey themselves. Their defenses, as you will see, are exceptional courage, an unshakable family bond, and an abiding desire to go home.
Hi, Easter.
Though once it was all so very ordinary. Here they were, a couple of kids off to college in Utah, happened to meet one day at church.
At first she didn't think I was all that fancy, but
no.
She learned to love me.
A little nerdy, but...
They had no idea, of course, what would be asked of them when they got married on a fine June day back in 1997, and moved to the Oregon countryside to the very town where Jason was born, and started a family of their own.
How old are you?
5.
And what do you have on your birthday plate?
A candle and fire.
And fire.
As we've had each one, healthy babies. They grow through their little childhood You have their little worries or concerns if they get bit by a dog or a broken arm or something, but nothing with this magnitude. It was on June 8th. It was a Friday. It was a RD day, I think. We were sat down and told that of our 5 children, that all of them either had cardiomyopathy or had flaggers or symptoms that they watch that can turn into a cardiomyopathy.
Their cardiologist, Dr. Daniel Bernstein, was as astonished as they were. Even though their echocardiograms years earlier had looked normal, now all the Bingham children, every single one, would be confronted with the distinct possibility of one day requiring a heart transplant just to stay alive. Because of that deadly condition many people have never heard of, dilated cardiomyopathy. They celebrated Halloween in the hospital. Then Thanksgiving. 6 months passed.
Our new quote has been, we're one day closer.
And now, Christmas was coming. The nurses claimed they'd seen Santa sneaking through the hospital.
He kind of walks in secretly, and then he goes up fast. He's like...
Jason and Stacy brought an artificial tree into Lindsay's room. She put on the finishing touch, her beads of courage, each bead representing a needle poke, a day in the hospital, or a procedure she has endured. But Christmas came and went. The wait was becoming unbearably long.
I can't go outside when it's raining or snowing, so it's hard to stay in here, and when I can't, it's like...
Valentine's Day approached. They had been waiting nearly 8 months now. And then, at 6 p.m. on February 12th, the doctor pulled Stacy out of Lindsay's room for a chat. Something to tell her. She refused to tell the kids what she was told.
Because I know the secret now.
Sarah
Mom.
thinks she knows. She doesn't know anything.
I know it.
Then Stacy called Jason and waited in Lindsay's room for him to arrive. He passed the nursing station, alive with excitement.
She doesn't know yet. Guess what?
I knew it!
Are
Guess
you ready?
what?
We gotta guess.
What?
Look at the window over there.
I have it! Do I have her?
You have a heart!
You do! It's gonna happen. It's finally gonna happen, princess. You did it.
And she had
You
it
did
mine.
it. You waited. Good morning, man.
So she did. Though what was coming next was, well, who could predict such a thing?
You gotta love when things can work out like that.
Like
but man, that little girl was excited, wasn't she?
She got a heart.
She got a heart. Not many people
God
will ever
bless
get one
her.
of those. Yeah, she was so excited.
So there you go, Amanda, your feel-good story, and we might do one of these at the end of every show. We really do need to do some upbeat stories too, and there are a lot in this world, a lot of unsung heroes, so we'll try to dig out some more for you.
The other part of the U Parts segment of our show was our friend Pat wanted us to do sports. He's a big sports fan.
Pat put a comment, he says, do a sports segment, man.
Yeah, man, so here we go. Here's a sports segment.
All right, here you go. The new home of TSN's All-Star Curling Skins game provides an opportunity for an outdoor feel, but not the feminine touch. At least not yet. The gorgeous refurbished curling rink at the Finland's Banff Recreation Center will be the site of the 2014 Big Cash competition. It comes up January 11th and 12th. An outdoor exhibition game featuring some of the sport's biggest stars is being planned, and once again, no women on the ballot. Fans will use to choose the players. It's likely to change for 2015, but Banff will host the game for at least a couple of years, and if all goes as planned before it's moved around to different deserving sensational venues. So Pat, to wrap up this sports segment, in 2015 it is the Skins getting a new spot on the schedule, one would assume, and it could come after the Scotties and Briar, or perhaps be pushed into the autumn schedule, but that's a little farther down the road. For 2014, the Skins game will be all out, big cash, big mountains, and big skies.
You know, I lost so much money betting on curling.
So there you go, Pat, your sports segment, and thanks for the comments. Ronnie, that's going to do it for this week. We've got another big show coming up on June 9th. Tell your friends about our show. We'd certainly love to have you a part of Parts in the Sum. Be looking for our Parts in the Sum news vehicle. It's going to be out and about here within a month or so. If you're in the Ohio area or around the tri-state area and you see PSW News on the license plate, that is us. And,
we might be out and about trying to get some surveys and opinions.
That's right. That's right. We might be at a Walmart near you, so look for us. That's going to do it. Hey, Ronnie, you have a good one until next week, okay?
I'll try.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Parts in the Sum of the Whole weekly podcast with Ronnie Glenn and Brian Vance. Congratulations to this week's winner. And don't forget, for your chance to win, just send us a question, comment, or idea for the show, and you'll be entered for that week. Check us out on Facebook or Twitter, or email us at partsinthesum@outlook.com. This has been a Pan Man Media Studio production. Copyright 2013.